Welcome to the episode of The Unknowns, where we talk to interesting people doing interesting things. Today, we have our guest, Robin Rue Simmons. If you've heard about reparations being talked about in your city council, or maybe at the state legislature, or in fact in Congress, you will have Robin to thank for that. Or perhaps you might be a little mad at her.
Thank you, Charlie. I'm happy to be here.
But just for everybody's knowledge and transparency, Robin and I do not know each other, but we both live in Evanston, Illinois. So go Cats.
Yes,
All
go
right.
Cats and kids. Go kids too.
Go Cats too, right? All right, well, let's
Yes.
talk a little bit. The part of the unknowns is we want to get to know the people before we talk policy, because I think the premise is that when we get to know people, we find similarities that sort of connect us together. Everybody's so apt to immediately talk about policy, which can divide us, before we talk about people. So we'd like to know, a little bit about yourself, your life, how did you get into this work?
Yeah, well, a little bit about me. I'm born and raised in Evanston in the Fifth Ward. It's predominantly historically Black. It's also the historically red line part of our city. That community in which I served as councilwoman really raised me. It was a village experience that I had, and I was fortunate to be primarily in a household, an intergenerational extended family household, including grandparents and uncles and cousins and so on. And so I had that rich, loving experience in a segregated community. And it wasn't until really I entered into the public school system that I saw Evanston in its total form, not just my neighborhood that was predominantly Black.
You said you were from a segregated part of Evanston, but that wasn't segregated by law, but by effect, right? I mean, what years are we talking about that you were growing up in Evanston?
Yeah, so I was born in the 70s, in the mid 70s, and I would say that it was in fact by law. Redlining at that point in my life had been outlawed, but the practice of redlining were still enforced in different ways through zoning laws, predatory lending, access to housing, and so on. But if you want to know about Robin the child, I was a very much loved little girl, my mother's only child, one of 6 daughters of my father's. Both my parents' families migrated here from Fulton, Missouri, and from Gunnersville, Alabama. And I was always curious, but always looking to lead and serve or figure out a better way, be entrepreneurial even. My first entrepreneurial endeavor was, making and selling friendship bracelets. We had a place in town, Tom Thumb, where you could go and buy craft material. Do you remember Tom Thumb, Charlie?
Not only do I remember Tom Thumb, I probably was over in the model section, and then also they had race cars. I don't know if you remember those race cars that we.
I do.
Yeah,
I do.
Sure. Yeah, I know
do.
Tom Thumb.
Yep. So I did that, and I got very curious about politics and government.
So, as a curious child growing up, when was the first experience where you just felt different?
Well, I could say that I began feeling that the difference when I got into the public school system. I was raised up initially. I attended an all-Black private school in town, Faith Christian Academy. When I got to the school, things began to feel different. And when I had my first play date, it was very clear on what I was feeling. There was a whole different quality of life. The houses were larger, the trees were taller, the streets were wider. Out of school time looked very different between myself and my white friends. And so it was that first play date that really brought clarity on what is this difference that I'm feeling. We're all showing up and pouring into the same diverse school, and the school is great, and I love my friends of every shade. That's one thing that's really great about Evanston is how beautiful and diverse it is. But it was my first play date that gave me clarity on this is a economic divide. This is not just a cultural divide. This is an economic divide.
What led you then? You ran for alderman, you won, right? Then also you were in a position to change. And then how did you bring this up? Because as we'll speak on the policy side, it's not, not everybody agrees on reparations, right?
There were very appropriate questions or concerns about legally, how will it be viable? It had been attempted before or law on demand that had not gone anywhere. How will we fund it? Those I wouldn't say were pushback, but I think they were reasonable concerns that came up from some of the city leaders, and we overcame them together. I'll say that once our work in Evanston became nationally known and internationally known, it became far more political, even in our own city, where we had a very harmonious road to reparations, to passing that legislation in November of 2019. And we had community members engaged and leaders engaged. But once there was political stage in town, it became political.
So let's dig into that. What is, from a philosophical standpoint, what is your most, resolved argument for reparations?
First of all, we have the institution of slavery here in the United States, and what it did to harm, the ongoing harms of Black families, those that were kidnapped from West Africa and enslaved here, stolen from, beaten, raped, discriminated in all forms and fashions. But what we did in Evanston were fighting for repair for the legacies of the institution of slavery. And that's going to be Jim Crow era law, anti-Black zoning laws, and other practices that we can measure harm the Black community in our wealth, our health, our quality of life, even our life expectancy. We have all forms of repair. So many default to a cash check or some sort of cash benefit for reparations, but we're really looking at comprehensive repair. We're looking at repairing and restoring our dignity. That's going to be with addressing education, Black and African history and education. We're going to be looking at holidays and monuments and acknowledgments and apologies as a way to restore our dignity.
So obviously, when you're presenting this, there's pushback sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody is 100%
Yep.
aligned. Some
Yep.
of the arguments that you're hearing against, what are the strongest arguments? Like, what are the ones that you're like, well, that's a good point?
Well, I can tell you, I can't give you one example that I thought was a good point, but I will tell you the most popular arguments against it. That it's too far removed, that the institution of slavery is too far removed for us to repair it. Well, there is no statute of limitation on crimes against humanity, and we certainly are still seeing the impact. How will we fund it? The bill is too high. There are national economists that are looking at $12 to $14 trillion. I've heard even $18 trillion it would take to repair the harm. We see many forms of reparations. The direct form that we've seen is the 1988 Civil Liberties Act that was passed for Japanese internment, and the Japanese community was awarded reparations in the form of a cash benefit of $20,000 at that time. But when it comes to repairing the harms and the crimes against Black people, there's a lot of question and debate about how is it viable, how is it fundable, and so on.
How does one qualify? Is it just being Black in America qualifies you, or is there more ancestral sort of lineage that needs to be acknowledged?
Well, that's to be determined when reparations is implemented nationally. There will be a lot to sort out. And there are questions about lineage and so on. But hyperlocally, what you're seeing is communities establish a harm report. And this is what will have to happen with the United States Congress as well. So I'll talk about Evanston since I'm an Evanstonian and I'm the chairwoman of the Reparations Committee. After a report that was done by Shorefront Legacy Center, it was determined that everyone Black in Evanston between the years of 1919 and 1969, when fair housing was passed, was harmed by the city of Evanston because of its anti-Black zoning laws at that time. So there was no question about your lineage. Were your ancestors enslaved in the United States? Did you come from Haiti, the Caribbean, or wherever? If you were Black, an adult, 18, during that period of time, or you are a direct descendant of someone during that period of time, the city is acknowledging its harm, and it is taking a step towards repair in a tangible way with a $25,000 direct benefit. And so from city to city and state and institution, what will happen is a harm report will inform eligibility. It will inform the form of repair, especially looking at a narrowly tailored framework for reparations, being the most viable framework for reparations. So that's the Evanston example. And other initiatives will be more specific to the harm in their locality.
But on a national level, and I know you want to stay in your lane, but
Mhm.
it's more challenging to discover the direct harm, right? I mean, I think from your standpoint, I think it's interesting that, it was very narrow in the sense of like there was an age group during a period of time where Jim Crow and redlining did exist, right? No doubt.
Mhm.
But how does that extrapolate to the national level? I mean, there's been some argument in California that did slavery even exist in California? So how can that even be acknowledgement of some sort of harm? So I'm curious, as you seem very narrowly focused on looking for harm, how does that resonate with some other people who want reparations that are not so focused on harm? It's just you have to be Black in America and and you're eligible.
Yeah, so I don't doubt that. I think being Black in America comes with harm, no matter the circumstances. I think we all have discrimination. I agree that far more is needed, and that um, only the United States government can really satisfy that comprehensive reparation. It has a capacity to do so. So when HR 40 is established, and there is a strong push for President Biden to sign an executive order for HR 40. So when it is established, the commission will create that harm report.
And then once, like in Evanston, there was some pushback from people who are in favor of reparations that it wasn't enough, right? How did
Right.
you sort of deal with that?
Well, you're right. So that was even an inter-community debate. Black community members support reparations, but upset that it wasn't enough. And to them, I did not agree. I mean, I did not disagree. I agree that the initial benefit alone is not enough. But I know that it is not only the city of Evanston that is responsible. We have a county that was harmful. We have the state of Illinois, and you should know, Charlie, that the state of Illinois has established the Illinois Task Force for Reparations. We have the United States government. We have all of these institutions, colleges and universities, healthcare systems, industries, and so on. So I think the debate against one initiative for reparations is short-sighted, and that energy is better spent in pursuing reparations from other institutions, government bodies. So my favorite African proverb is little by little, a little becomes a lot. And I believe in reparations, that is a proverb that we can embrace.
Okay, so what is a lot? There's some indication that Evanston is just the start, right? Is there a moment in time where there is a lot, which is enough? Do you have a vision? Like if you could snap your fingers and make this all become a reality, what would all African Americans get or be entitled to or should be entitled to? Is there a monetary figure?
So, Charlie, I look at it very differently than any transaction. I can't imagine a single transaction or a single dollar amount, because in some cases, when you talk to Black residents, they're less concerned about a dollar and more concerned about emotional healing and being heard and education. Some folks want to have access to West Africa, return there, and see what a village was like. I was fortunate to be able to do that after I received my DNA ancestry and found out where my foremother was kidnapped from. So for me, and for most, I would say reparations is a process. It's a complex, it will be a protracted process.
And if you envision that all goes your way,
Mhm.
are we talking about 50 years, 100 years, 200 years? Like how much time do you think it will take, in your estimation, to repair what you feel has been done?
Well, with a federal response, far shorter. And I would say with a federal response, my children and their children will see an improved quality of life. The federal government has the capacity to do that.
And for some of the viewers who are not in favor, what are they missing that they're not seeing in your perspective?
Well, see, the first thing that those in opposition are missing is, for some reason, it's the narrative is almost like it is an attack on white people. It is an attack on white people, their wealth and privilege, and naturally, someone is, going to be defensive under those circumstances. This is not an attack on white people. It is not an assault on, your wealth and privileges. It's justice. The movement for reparations is far less fringe than it was before. It is becoming commonplace and common sense because we are seeing models that are viable, have been implemented, and have been reparative. So I would challenge your listeners that are reparations curious to be informed by what's happening in Evanston. You can visit cityofelvanston.org/reparations to learn more about that initiative. Or if you're more interested broadly in the reparations movement and how it was one city in 2019 and now about 130 cities that have passed reparations initiative, including the state of California first, the state of Illinois, and the state of New York. You can follow firstrepair.org to learn more there.
Robin Rue, thank you for your time today, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, Charlie.